Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Talk About the POTS Life, your go-to podcast for all things POTS. Whether you're living with POTS or supporting someone who is, this is the place for you.
Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk About the POTS Life. Today we're fortunate to have Dr. Lindsay Sironi with us. She is a health psychologist in Maryland, an assistant professor at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, and the former director of psychology services for POTS at the Kennedy Krieger Institute in Baltimore.
Lindsay and I connected, I think I sent her an email, right? Yeah, we sent an email and then her and I connected and I just, you know how sometimes you just meet people and you're like, it clicks. And I felt like when her and I spoke, I'm like, oh my gosh, we had so many ideas. And I'm like, would you do the podcast? Because I just thought her insight and her experience and just, I think she really fits the POTS life mentality. You know, we're just trying to give hope and she has so much experience. So we are so excited to have you on today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, and this is our first time meeting, so I'm really curious to get a little bit more about your background. What led you to working with POTS in the first place?
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. I was working at Kennedy Krieger full time. My sort of primary area of expertise is working with people who have chronic medical conditions. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I was approached by a rehab physician, Dr. Christina Cocorellis, who is really well trained in the POTS world, to say, I want to start a POTS clinic. I feel like it should be multidisciplinary. We really want to do a good job of instilling hope and giving people all the tools that they need to live a life with POTS. Would you do this with me? And at that point, I had met some patients with POTS, had done some POTS work, but was really excited to sort of dive in headfirst. And it, hands down, has been one of the most amazing professional experiences I've ever had, because I think everybody here knows that getting an accurate diagnosis of POTS is such a difficult and oftentimes traumatic journey.
So long.
Yeah, it takes so long. There's so many misdiagnoses along the way. And to be a part of something that was helping start things out in the right direction and instilling hope and helping people it's just been one of the most amazing experiences for me. So that's how I got into it.
See why I love her? She says instilling hope and all the things because she's so right. It's so important to have multidisciplinary care and attack it from all sides because it's missed on so many of those sides. So it's so cool she was able to be on the forefront of something like that.
Yeah, it's been really amazing. It's been a great journey.
So why don't you tell us a little bit? I know at that time when you were working there, pediatric was the main focus. What would you see like when they made it to you into clinic? Would you also see those long roads of misdiagnosis, different physicians, things like that?
Yeah. And, the thing that astounded me the most, and this is a little bit of a passion of mine, is just the number of people who have been told at some point by someone, usually somebody wearing a white coat, that all of their symptoms were anxiety and that they needed to go have their anxiety treated. And so you can imagine, as a psychologist walking into a room, talking with people who've had this experience, I used to tell my patients kind of straight up, hey, I understand this is probably something that you've been told, and I am here to tell you as a psychologist that your symptoms are real and that they're not all related to anxiety and that we can treat POTS and it can get better. And the relief on people's faces when I would say that, it was just gut-wrenching. I'm happy they were relieved, obviously, but knowledge that they had been put through the ringer and sent down all the wrong pathways. And especially to have a medical condition blamed on mental health when these people with POTS are doing everything they can to live, right?
To just survive.
Yeah, you don't need more shame. Yeah.
And it's frustrating too. And I'm sure this was a piece that you saw, and especially because, we have plenty of younger patients on our app and in office, but the parents probably looked at you almost the same way, or maybe I would assume if it was my son, I would look so relieved, like finally somebody is taking that burden off of their child or something like, okay, yes, there's an anxiety piece to it, but it's not that, and we can help you move forward.
Yeah. And for so many people, the anxiety didn't come into play really until they had to struggle to understand what was going
Yeah.
on with their bodies.
Right. It's just, I always say POTS is not anxiety, but it sure as heck drives it, because when these things start to happen or you get these adrenaline responses, I was just talking to somebody in California and she got one of the adrenaline dumps. The poor thing, hers happened to be when she's driving.
Ah,
And in California traffic, right, it drives the anxiety because then she's like, am I going to make it home? Am I going to have to pull off on the freeway? It just drives that. So she's like, you don't think it came from like a panic attack? I'm like, no, I think you got an adrenaline dump. And then, yes, the anxious piece kicked in, but just them understanding and hearing from you, like, okay, no, this is real. This does come. And then these are the tools that we can move forward to help you when those episodes come. I think I tell people if they don't walk in here with seeing some sort of psychologist, something, it's very helpful, myself included. I was telling Lindsay, I think when we met, that I wasn't sure when I started with Cleveland Clinic, and that was not something they had at the time, but they were adding her in, I would say maybe 6 or 7 months after I started, and they were like, "Would you see her?" I thought to myself, maybe I don't need that, but then I thought, "Oh, what the heck, I should do it." And just getting your voice out, your concerns out to somebody else that wasn't my husband or my parents or something, I think that neutral space that you provide is huge, and I mean, just therapeutic on so many levels.
yeah, yeah. And what I do when I work with people is we really kind of focus on all the pieces, right? Acknowledging that there are some physiological pieces that need to be treated in a physiological way. There may be some anxiety, there may be some trauma, there may be some depression, and all of that is so normal after the journey that folks have been on to get that diagnosis. One thing that I think is important to point out is that, there are a number of psychologists like me across the country who are health psychologists who are trained in helping people manage their medical condition. And so, like you were saying, you don't necessarily need to have an anxiety disorder or have trauma or have depression to really benefit from working with a psychologist who's familiar with pot. And not everybody needs to do that, but it can be really helpful because it's so hard to have that mental load day to
All
day.
the time.
The
Yeah.
medication schedule and the hydration and the exercise and by the way, I know that you guys work with a ton of women and a ton of moms. And the mental load and that burden becomes so immense that sometimes it's just helpful to have somebody who knows about pod,
Yep.
about how the brain works, to be able to just kind of like be an extra support for managing all of that.
I think it's critical, honestly, because, it's important to find somebody who understands POTS for PT, the same thing in your dynamic, because if you just walk into somebody who's never heard of POTS and you unload these symptoms onto somebody, they're going to be like, whoa, where do I start? In your background, you understand what POTS is. Chronic pain, I know that's a big thing you're helping others with. So just having somebody that's familiar, I mean, I just think it adds, to that. I always say we're putting together puzzle pieces, and that is a huge piece to this puzzle.
Yeah. And my hope is that one day our system starts to move more quickly in the direction of incorporating all of those pieces from
Yes.
jump, right? From diagnosis. We're not there yet, but there are places in our country who are inching closer and closer to that kind of medical model. And man, if you can find one of those places like Cleveland Clinic, like Kennedy Krieger, and there are many others in the country, it really benefits patients so much more than this kind of ping pong.
Like
Yeah.
piecing together, you can only, depending on location, you can only get so many places. But yeah, when you go somewhere that just has, for me, allergy immunology, she has an understanding of POTS. I've seen gynecology there, understanding of POTS. So those types of places, you're right, the multidisciplinary care, man, I wish we could get that everywhere.
Yeah, and I think, you guys at the Pop Life are doing an incredible job. This is a passion of mine. One of the things that moves us toward that is just education and getting in the ear of our medical providers who truly, by and large, most of them really, really want to do right by their patients and they want to be helpful. And, talking with your doctors and talking with your therapist about, hey, this is POTS and this is what it's another burden, right? So when who are in the field working with the diagnosis, who have our colleagues that we can say, hey, have you thought about POTS, right?
Yeah.
Or have you thought about how POTS is impacting this situation that you're trying to treat? Doing that advocacy work like you guys are doing with this podcast and with the program is so important.
I love that because that's what we're trying to do. Just get the message out there. I shared with Lindsay and I've shared it on the podcast. When I was diagnosed, I'm scouring the internet, looking for things like this, looking for somebody who could just understand in a different way than, Facebook groups. This way, it's relatable. They're real humans, real life stories, and somebody that says it's not perfect, but we're going to give you hope and help you along the way.
Yeah, hope is so important and it's so hard to find sometimes. But the reality is that I see people get better and it's so important to me to put that message out there.
Yes.
I see people get better, right? You've seen people get better. It happens.
Yep.
And I think, you can really fall down some dark internet holes where that hope just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And so I think it's so important for those of us who've seen it or experienced it to just broadcast that, right?
Yes. I say if I could scream it from the rooftops, you can get better.
Yeah.
It is possible.
We just talked on a past episode about it is such a long journey to get your diagnosis. Some Kelsey's took years, others it's a little bit, depending on how much you advocate for yourself is really a determination of how quick you get that diagnosis. But then we were saying, okay, you got the diagnosis. Now what? Now you're like, I thought I had this. I did this research. I did this. I need a program that helps. But you're like almost like an imposter syndrome. Like, okay, do I really have POTS? Is this what I have? I've been to too many doctors. And I think your line of work, it just helps reaffirm and confirm like, yes, this was a lot to get here. And you do have POTS and you can get better. You can move forward.
Yeah. And sometimes it can be really discouraging to have done all that work and then get a diagnosis and then realize that there's so much work to do.
Yeah.
That was
not
me.
like a pill. Yeah. Yep.
Yes, that was me.
Yeah. It can be really discouraging. So sometimes, when I work with folks, we kind of do like a POTS boot camp where we take all the information that they're getting from their physical therapist and their rheumatologist and their cardiologist and put it together and we say, okay, what does this actually mean for your day to day? And how do we break this down into something that's manageable so that you can feel less overwhelmed and more empowered to manage? Because it's real. I mean, the burden is real.
And it doesn't go away. I think that's where we're both transparent. It takes time and it takes a while to build there and feel okay and see progress. But I mean, that was me when I was diagnosed. I thought I was going to hang up and be like, okay, I have this diagnosis. I'm going to just feel the relief. Honestly, it was probably opposite. And I was like, oh my gosh, now what? So it is a little daunting when you're first diagnosed and then you see the work you have to put in and you can provide that safe space for people to have an outlet to say, wow, this really sucks.
Right.
You know, because it does. There are days that it really sucks. Me last night going downstairs to get on the treadmill after I had a crazy day with my children. There I am on the treadmill at 6:30 and I'm like, this sucks. So it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I was talking actually the other day with someone I know who has POTS and we were discussing the idea, the fact that the choice, people who don't have POTS have a choice to take care of their bodies, right? They have a choice to go for a walk. They have a choice to go to the gym. If you're healthy and not struggling with a chronic illness, you kind of get to decide if you stay up late one
100%.
night, don't eat well for 3 days in a row, whatever. And it's in and of itself is such a privilege to have that choice to do what you're supposed to do for your body or not. And when you have POTS, like you said, like coming downstairs to get on the treadmill at 6:30 p.m., most people would say, no, I'm
Not
tired.
doing it.
Yes.
Don't have that choice. And, I just think I love this community. I love this POTS Life community because if there can be compassion, right? Self-compassion.
Yes.
Acknowledging this sucks. I don't want to be on the treadmill right now.
Yeah. Right.
Who doesn't have POTS wouldn't have to do this. And to just
No.
somebody say, you know what? Yeah,
Yep.
you're right. It sucks. And other people don't have to do this. And it's hard. I think that in and of itself, that understanding, that compassion is so helpful for people.
That's our goal, is to feel a little less alone. I got a message through the chat feature yesterday, and she's a mom, and she said, I am usually the person who brings everybody up. I'm the, cheerleader. I'm the biggest, like, it's going to be fine. We're going to get through this. And she said, she's doing so well. And she was like, but can I be vulnerable for a second that, I'm doing so great, but I'm still having all of these things. And I pretty much said that exact message to her. I said, listen, I 100% get it. And it's so normal to have days where you're like, this sucks. I'm mad. I'm frustrated, all of those emotions. But then in the same breath, I say, okay, but don't stay there. We have to move out of that space. But just know that it's not perfect. And just because, you have a couple bad days, and it is hard to remember where you came from. Her husband said, not every day's perfect, but look where you were, 3 months ago or whatever. So hope inside this program that those are the messages that we're relaying and giving you just, I don't know, just compassion that this does suck and it's okay, but we'll let you be sad there for a second, but we'll help you get out of it too and move forward.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I tell my patients all the time, the best advice I ever got wasn't from grad school. It wasn't from training. It wasn't from working in hospitals. It was my mom. Yeah. My mom, moms always know, right? But my mom has always said, okay, it's okay to be mad. Set a time limit. It's okay.
Yep.
And then we're moving on.
Set a time limit.
Yeah.
Like, allow yourself the reality of that emotion because it's real. But set your timer. My mom would always,
because we're moving on.
I swear by it, right? I swear by being a psychologist. All right, set your timer. And then let's figure out what to do about it.
Yes. Yeah, it's so true.
And we've been able to help folks connect with other folks with POTS because you might not know someone in your area, but our app allows you to build a community. You could ask those questions, like to get someone else's feedback. We've had folks take it outside of the app and now they're texting each other. And that's so awesome to see the support network growing and expanding, that you can text that friend that has POTS across the country at 6:30 when you're angry that you have to get on the treadmill, and they can be your accountability partner. But you got to do it. You're not going to feel great. If you don't do this, what's going to happen tomorrow, kind of deal.
Oh yeah, I love it.
I love that so much because as a psychologist, I can't connect my patients, right? HIPAA will not let me introduce my patients to each other.
Yep.
And that's a good thing, but I'm so excited to have learned about the POTS Life and the program because this means I can say, hey, there's a community here that I can't connect you to, but it exists and there's an app for it. And how great is that?
Oh, yeah, it is. It's cool to just see it, unfold and people make those connections and just really start to relate to each other. That's what I could have dreamed of when we did it. This is shifting focus a little bit, but I think it's something we see all the time. And I know you have quite a background too with chronic pain, which we do see a lot. And I feel like it would be helpful for listeners to hear, a ton of POTS patients also have a diagnosis of EDS, and that comes with pain, right? I feel like sometimes I'm working to advocate to acknowledge the pain, that yes, we have this pain, but then also finding that healthy boundary of, but to improve the pain, we kind of got to, work through some things, or just helping, and I'll probably learn from you also, helping find the balance or maybe the right communication tools to be okay, yes, we're acknowledging the pain, but, how much do we push through, or how to make them feel more comfortable that, you got to find this happy medium in order to get better.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'd love to talk about that. So it's a bit of a tricky situation having these conversations. As you know, most people with POTS and EDS have struggled to get anybody to listen to what's So when I'm talking with my patients about managing chronic pain related to EDS or any other chronic,
just in general,
migraine, whatever, it can be a tricky conversation because the reality is that most often there's been a period of time where nobody listened and nobody took you seriously. And so the last thing that you want sometimes is another person kind of in your face saying like, okay, yeah, you have pain, but
But
we
move on.
other things, right? So it is a delicate conversation. And, I'm always trying to lead with compassion, right? The pain exists and it is debilitating at times. And there are some days where like getting out of bed may not be in the cards, and that is okay. The tricky piece is I often talk with my patients about we often do better before we feel better in the peak POTS world, right? We often find ourselves being upright a little bit longer before we start to feel better being upright.
Correct. Right.
And that is a really hard concept to grapple with when you are in so much pain. But if you can latch onto it, if you can accept it, if you could think about it, okay, I don't feel like I can be out of bed today, but I'm going to sit up.
Right. Baby steps.
Baby steps. And you're not going to feel fantastic when you sit up, right? The feeling fantastic part comes later. It doesn't come immediately. But if we wait until we're feeling fantastic to live our lives are going to pass us by.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the hard truth of the matter. I love to talk with people about a symptom window and I know you guys do a lot in this work too in physical therapy, where even in your activities, your social activities, your cognitive activities, your relationships with your loved ones, if you're able to look at doing a little bit more than I did yesterday, but not much that I trash, that window of tolerance is just going to grow and grow.
Yes.
And know it. Not only are you doing more, but you're also feeling better before, while doing those activities. So even things like, I work with a lot of college age students, even things like figuring out how to have a social life.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to class, you're doing all the things, you might be walking across campus, and there doesn't seem to be time or energy to be able to have time for friends. Oh, hey, but what does that look like? Maybe it doesn't look like going out to the bar until 2 a.m. Maybe right now it looks like grabbing coffee with a friend. And maybe that's a little bit more than you were doing, but before you know it, that window grows and you're able to more and more time and you're able to do more and more. And so, I talked a lot, but the answer to the pain question is really, how do we find the in-between? And how do we live in that in-between, knowing that it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be better than what we had?
And I think too, and this would be perfect for that window, is because there's a lot of fear, right? I think part of it is they don't even try because of fear of what they may feel like. But if they try the window, then I think it really shows them, oh, like exactly like you said, it might not be perfect, but it wasn't as bad as I thought.
Yeah. And you may need to develop some strategies and some safety nets for that fear, right? If you are one of the unfortunate minority of POTS patients that faints all the time, you may need to develop a plan of like, all right, I'm going to have a friend over because if I pass out, it's going to be on the couch, right? And maybe that's the first baby step. Or maybe it's, letting your friends know that, hey, if I start to look or feel faint, I'm going to need to sit down. And just that knowledge that somebody else knows gives you the courage to take that baby step. So, you may actually need safety nets. You may need a plan for what happens if your symptoms get worse. But that's okay. You can make them.
Yeah, I think that's huge because I think a lot of times, especially like you said, college age students. I have one, when she first came to me, she is living her day by naps. I go to class, I nap. I go to class, I nap. So just being like, okay, I'm not against you napping, but we got to shorten the time, or maybe you don't do 4 naps today or something like that. The question I get all the time, and I'm sure that you've seen this too in your work, that I want my child to still play sports, right? It's like what they like to do. I want them still to dance. I want them to still be active. And I learned this a long time ago. If you take away everything from them, no one's going to stick with it.
Right.
So we try to find that happy medium. I have a great mom, and she has a daughter with POTS, and some people look at her sideways because she lets her daughter play soccer. And they're like, how dare you? But you got to find the window. We know that it's 10 minutes she can play. So I think it relates on so many levels, no matter what age you're at, that like you got to find what's enough, but not too much. And the girl that was here this morning, she was trying to exercise at the gym, didn't go well. And she pushed herself too hard and she was really down on herself. And I said, well, you just learned. We just learned that was too much. You pull it back and you try again. So there's no harm in trying. I think it's just there's more reward in doing something than doing nothing.
I will say, in my experience, I can make this statement unequivocally, and people might balk at it, but I often see the fear of symptoms having more of a negative impact.
1000%. Yes.
Themselves. It makes so much sense to be afraid. What if I words? What if I pass out? It makes so much sense. Numerous POTS patients who have fainted and ended up with a concussion because of that. And to be afraid of that, right?
Yep.
But the fear of those symptoms can impact your quality of life so much more than the symptoms themselves. It's a very powerful thing that your brain does that often you don't realize it's doing.
And it really stops you from being able to take that next step forward to really make those improvements. Because if we listen to our body and how terrible we felt, you know, if you have the flu, they tell you to rest, right?
Right.
But with POTS, you rest, you get worse. These flu-like symptoms get worse. So it is like a mental mind shift. But yeah, the fear of all those symptoms, will it be worse? And all you can do is try. And it's okay that if you try and you weren't quite ready for it, that's no problem. You know, you just, tomorrow's a new day, and we try to find or shift that window.
And it's okay to need help wrestling with fear. It's okay because the fear makes sense. How many years did you spend struggling to figure out what was going on? How many years did you spend being afraid that you were going to make it worse?
And feel crazy. I mean, I felt like there were so many symptoms that I had that if you go into a doctor and you tell them all, you're crazy. And they're like, okay, anxiety. But really, they're real symptoms.
Yeah, they're real symptoms. And the fear of those real symptoms makes a lot of sense. So it is okay to need help facing that fear.
We talk a lot about the POTS Life program being a lifestyle change because it's not something you flip a switch and you feel better tomorrow. There's no magic cure. There's nothing of that. But we all know as healthcare professionals that lifestyle changes are hard. They're not easy for anyone, whether that's changing your diet to decrease your chance of developing type 2 diabetes or everything is hard when it comes to a long-term change that you have to maintain. And we try to remind people to celebrate the little wins along the way because it's going to get bumpy. You're going to have setbacks, but the longer you do something, the more the habits form, and then you're going to be better off, 6 months, a year down the line.
I really love the concept of like a success journal. Sometimes I call it a party journal. Because again, you often do better before you feel like you're doing it. Personally, I hate journaling. As a psychologist, I'm not ashamed to say, but if you can keep just an ongoing list of like, what did I do today? I went to my kids' daddy-daughter dance, or I went to my I went to my gym class for the first time, and whatever it is, when you're making that list and you're keeping a running tab, it starts to look like a journey towards success.
Yes.
Even when it doesn't feel like a journey towards success day to day. I love a good party journal.
Oh, I love that because it's so true. And it goes with, sometimes I didn't feel the progress, but my husband would notice it or my parents would notice it. But when you live day to day with the symptoms, you're like, oh, am I ever getting better? But then when you look back, and I try to tell people that, okay, imagine 3 months ago, you couldn't do this, or 2 months ago, or even at the beginning of the month, and now you can. But I think having it in writing where they can go back and reference it is even better. I love that.
Yeah.
And again, you go back to the community, having a community of people that you can celebrate with, right?
Yep.
If you go to your work and you're like, guys, guess what? I walked a mile yesterday.
They're like, whoa.
Okay. But if you go to your POTS community, if you go to your POTS PT, if you go to
Oh,
your,
yeah, I'm cheering over here like crazy.
like, out the pom-poms, this is a really big deal. That
Mhm.
mile was so hard won.
I tell this story often, but I just had the memory pop up, I don't know, maybe last week, but it was, I mean, pretty far into my treatment. But my neighborhood it has like a few hills, and it's about 1.5 miles. And I posted a picture. I pushed my double stroller with my boys, which was so heavy. I coordinated the dog and the leash, and I did the whole thing. And I said to my boy, smile, we're taking a picture, because in a normal, I mean, I see moms in my neighborhood all the time running with their joggers. Me, I'm like, I made the 1.5 miles. I pushed the kids. I had the dog. We survived. I didn't need to call my mom to pick me up. Like, we did it. So it's like people that are in this community are like, well, that's a huge milestone. So like, they just get it.
Find your people and let them
Yes.
celebrate you.
Yes. I love that.
We've had a few graduates on the podcast in the past that talked about, oh, their kids said, oh, mommy, you're not sick anymore. And it's like the people around you are, even if they don't know or they can't understand what's happening, they see the progress, and you're going to hear it from them as you get better.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. I do a lot of work with folks around identity, right? Because for almost anyone, if you look at their lives before the onset of POTS symptoms and you look at their lives after, almost everyone will tell you, I don't feel like myself anymore, right? And for so many people, there's a loss of identity that
Oh,
comes
100%.
as part of this journey, and a lot of questions about, well, I was a mom or an athlete or a school teacher or whatever, and now I'm barely keeping up with my kids, or I had to quit my job, or I can't move my body in the same way anymore. So go through like several phases of identity shift. You know, you go from oftentimes a healthy, fully functioning person to someone who can't trust their body and is having to fight for recognition. And now you have this diagnosis. And am I a sick person now? Am I a disabled person now? Who am I? What does this look like? And you have to kind of like reconcile with those identities over time.
Oh, 100%.
And over again. And so many times I see people at the end phases of their journey to healing who really struggle to be okay, right? When somebody says to them, you look better, you feel better, you're healthy again, you're not sick, there's this automatic alarm bell that goes off inside that's like, well, what if I am? And what if I get sick again? And call me healthy, because the idea that I could be healthy but then get sick again is so terrifying that I can't live in the truth of today where I feel okay.
I never resonated with a statement so much. It's so true, because in the beginning, that was me. I mean, I literally got goosebumps when you said it. When I was sitting at Cleveland Clinic, he said to me, he turned and said to my husband and I, Kelsey, the person you were before POTS is gone. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, I'm a mom of 2. Here I am. Like, what is happening? So many thoughts through my mind. And then he said, but the person after POTS can be just as good or better. And I'll be honest, I was like, well, no way. I'm crawling up my steps. There's absolutely no way. And then you wrestle, you go home and you start treatment, and you're like, what is my life? You know, my husband's carrying my kids downstairs while I scoot down on my butt, and you struggle in that. And you probably have so many of these identities. You're right. It ebbs and flows of who you are. And then also after, there is I say like a healthy fear, but some days, I mean, if you don't like turn that switch off, it can overwhelm you, because if I don't do what I'm supposed to, it 100% will go out of control again, which is daunting in itself. So there are so many emotions to work through as you move through this.
And it's so complicated by this for many people, prolonged traumatic experience where nobody lived, right?
Yep.
And
Mhm.
so it's really in the end, I won't say the end, but when you're starting to feel better, one of the most difficult steps can be going from a person who is sick to a person who gets sick.
Mhm.
Such a hurdle because it means like in some ways letting go of that fear and letting go of that sort of identity that to fight so hard to get in the first place.
Yep.
Yeah, you're so right. Because some of these people are years and years and years. Some of them are 20 plus years. I have somebody who's coming for an eval later this month, and he read the story that just went out in the newspaper. And now they're getting his records. I mean, he has seen at the doctor so many times and things, especially being a male, that's even harder to get that diagnosis. And they just said when they spoke with Jenna that just how much made sense and all the pieces. And as I'm reading his history, I mean, it really does. But who knows how long he's been suffering, years and years. So it's hard to find who am I now?
Absolutely.
When Kelsey first told me she was diagnosed with POTS a couple years ago, I had no idea what that was. And we have been still trying to figure out the best, like, how do you explain POTS to someone else? What is your go-to definition of like, this is POTS?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer depends primarily upon like how old you are when you're getting diagnosed, right? So for my teenagers and my college age kids, and even for some adults who just don't want to mess with the lengthy explanation, I just have them tell friends and family, my body doesn't move blood as well as it is supposed to. And so
Oh, I love that.
that I like get faint or I have weird symptoms or my brain doesn't work as well as it should. But there are things I can do to manage that. Um, this is something that a lot of people struggle with is how do I explain?
Yep.
And I was actually having this conversation with somebody the other day where they really felt like they explained POTS and the other person that they were talking to didn't get it. And so they were kind of like, I don't think I did a good job of explaining it. And I just said, I don't think you did a bad job of explaining it. I think it's a hard concept to understand.
Yes.
So don't put that on yourself.
No.
Right? It's not your personal failure that somebody doesn't understand what you're going through.
Right.
It's a difficult concept to understand. And I am a huge proponent of people sharing only what they want to. Right? POTS journey is your POTS journey. Your POTS diagnosis is your POTS diagnosis. And at the end of the day, it is not anybody's business unless you want to share, unless you choose to share. And in those cases, you can keep it as short and simple as you want to, or you can go into the most beautiful scientific explanation, that your doctors can give you. But at the end of the day, their understanding is not dependent on you.
What you put out there. You're right. Somebody might already not understand. You say and describe it how you feel is appropriate. And if they don't get it, they just don't get it.
Yeah. And, sometimes you're dealing with the opposite where people are just like really nosy. Maybe you've missed on a work or whatever. And in those cases, I like to recommend, you can say something short and simple, like I have POTS and I had to take some time off, but I'm doing better now. Here are some resources if you'd like to learn more about it. Right. And let me tell you, 90% of the time, that person is not going to go look up what POTS means, but it takes the burden off of you. Right. If you're that curious, here's some ways that you can answer your own question. And I'm going to go on like carrying the immense POTS burden that I already deal with. And I'm going to stop worrying about whether or not you understand what I'm saying.
Right.
There's the other side of the coin is when you're not getting what you need in a school or a work situation, advocate for yourself. And that's kind of a different scenario than what we're talking about.
Yeah, because like Kelsey says, you don't visibly maybe look like you're sick. So it's not easy for someone to identify that you might need extra help or support, but you have to learn how to confidently say what you need so that people hopefully will listen to you.
Yeah, yeah. And if you found a good medical provider, if you found a good physical therapist, if you found a good health psychologist, let me tell you, we know we are professionals at writing letters that
Mhm.
say this is what they need. So again, you're not alone in that
Yeah.
battle. It feels like you're alone,
Mhm.
but don't be afraid to ask your treating providers for those resources, because guess what? In this country, it is still illegal to discriminate based on a health condition. And we all know what it looks like to write a letter to say, hey, this person has a medical condition. This is what they need as accommodations, to take that to your college, your workplace,
I
what.
think that's a huge piece of this, right?
Mhm.
Many, especially the younger students, or I guess the whole way up, you see it in college, you see it in the workplace as adults, just having those safety nets and that support around you. I think that's huge. I think Lindsay and I have talked about this, but I just want to make sure that we're correct. You can see people virtually, correct?
I can, and I can see people. I am authorized through a piece of legislation called SIPENT to be able to see people virtually in most states in the country. So geography is not necessarily a limiting factor for most people.
Yeah, I think it's huge because having somebody else, we always preach build that team. And I think now we're making these connections to build that team. And like she said, geographically, it doesn't matter. You can feel the support of us. She can support you on her end and just really help fill in some of that puzzle to just get you back to a hopeful place. So, yeah, do you want to tell them a little bit about how they can find your services and all of those things?
Absolutely. So the best way to get in touch with me is through my website, which is www.align-health.com. My private practice is called Align Behavioral Health. And there's a button on my website that you can click to schedule like a 15-20 minute conversation with me. Love to hear about the things that you're going through and think about ways that I can help. Like you guys, this isn't just a job for me. I have family members with chronic medical conditions, and particularly in the POTS world, I just feel like it's so misunderstood. There's so many advocates that are needed, that this is really my favorite thing to do, is to help people who have POTS. Reach out. Don't hesitate to reach out. I always tell people, if I'm not the best person to help you, I will help you identify other people who can, because I think, again, that's so important, that the burden of finding help is not solely on the person who needs it.
No, because it's overwhelming just to do life and figure out your own life. So I think it's nothing I have to convince you of, because now they've listened to Lindsay share her story. I mean, she is such a perfect piece to this. And really, she does. She comes at it from a place of love and understanding and hope and, just really what I feel like the whole POTS life idea is. And she just fits so great into that. And I love it because we're coming from a place, we just want to help you feel better, however that is. And however we can help or put you in contact with people in your area, if that's what you're looking for, we're happy to do it.
Yeah, same. You can find me on TikTok and Instagram. I will be honest with you, social media is not my favorite thing, but I feel like there's so much misinformation out in social media land about POTS and all the comorbid conditions, that it's just me kind of trying to do my little part to put some truth out there, put some hope out there, get people moving in the right direction.
Yeah. The more we can spread positive, hopeful information and resources, the better.
Yeah. And you can find the link to all those social media accounts on my website too.
Thanks for all the advocacy work that you do in your time today. When I was doing my research on your website, you had a statement that you hope that POTS becomes a part of your life and not an illness that governs it. And I really loved that. I thought it would resonate really well with anyone listening, that it's a part of life. It should not dictate it. So I thought that was wonderful.
You get to be the boss with the right tools,
do.
right words. You get to be the boss. POTS doesn't run the show.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love all of this. I just love it. I'm so glad she came on. I can't thank you enough.
It's my pleasure. Thank you guys so much for everything that you're doing.
Oh, you too. And remember, check her out on her website, all of her social media, and you guys will love her just as much as we do. I know it.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tune in next time for another episode.
See you then. Bye.